The first Unitarian Universalist service I ever went to, believe it or not, was actually a Dia de los Muertos service, a service for Day of the Dead. Back when I was in the third grade, I walked through the round doors of the First Unitarian Church in San Jose in California with my grandmother, Torch. Now, before I say more about this spectacular service, my grandma Torch deserves a bit more of an introduction, and I think you'll see why. She has hair the color of a red onion, and she's got a fiery spirit just like her name suggests. Torch also writes for the monthly gossip column for the San Jose UU Church's newsletter. And even more special, my grandma has been a second mother to my mom and has been a part of my life since I was born. Although she's technically my adopted grandma, she's every bit of a grandmother to me. And she's honestly quite the UU evangelist. She never lets me forget that she's the reason that I'm now on this track pursuing ordination as a Unitarian Universalist minister. And sitting in the service with my grandmother that day, I was met with a gorgeous scene. The church had a large altar up in the front, decorated in yellows, pinks, reds, and purple of papel picado, the colorful decorative tissue paper, calaveras, the decorated sugar skulls, and cempasúchil, the golden marigolds. We sang hymns and recited the church covenant and opening words in both English and in Spanish. The Time for All Ages invited us youth to come to the altar and to place things to remember our family members and loved ones. After we were sung to our classes that day, we got to decorate paper calaveras and even cut them out into masks. And it was such a beautiful celebration and experience for me as a youth. This was a moment when I felt deeply affirmed in aspects of my own identity and family traditions. You see, you might not know it looking at me, but I am part Mexican American. My mom, who is half Mexican, grew up very close to the traditions in her family. My mom cooked traditional meals and dishes growing up. She learned Spanish and spoke it at home with her mother. And when she was a girl, her family would make numerous trips to Mexico and parts of Texas to visit family members and relatives. When it came to my younger brother and me, my mom wanted us to retain a connection to our family roots. In California, we were lucky to have bilingual Spanish and English classes at our public elementary school. We grew up with many other friends who were Mexican American, and in our family, we sometimes celebrated Dia de los Muertos by putting up an altar in the backyard, sprinkling flower petals along the pathway for the spirits of our loved ones to be guided to our ofrenda. This history of families putting up ofrendas and altars for their lost loved ones is rich. El Dia de los Muertos is a celebration with roots that go back 3,000 years to pre-Columbian times. It has been shaped by both indigenous roots, with influences also from Catholicism. Today is the first day of Dia de los Muertos, and it is often celebrated for many days after. This holiday encompasses two important dates on the Christian calendar: All Saints' Day today and All Souls' Day tomorrow. In this tradition, it is believed that on El Dia de los Muertos, the gates to heaven are opened up to allow our departed loved ones to return to us and be with us. Families in Mexico, the United States, and parts of Latin America visit their grave sites of loved ones and decorate altars with favorite foods and drinks of their lost loved ones. And in order for the loved ones to find these altars, marigold petals are scattered in a path to lead the ancestors by their bright color and aroma. And although this tradition speaks to the realities of death, this isn't a ritual of mourning. Instead, it is a ritual of celebration. It's about honoring a deep truth behind Dia de los Muertos, that the dead aren't really dead to us unless we've forgotten them. Our reading this morning, Mensaje en Colores, Message in Colors, by Julie Sopetran, that Macrina and Leti read for us today so beautifully. This is a poem that encapsulates the essence of what makes Dia de los Muertos. Sopetran writes, lit candles, faces, memories. It is the prime time of the celebration of death's needle. It is the decomposition of matter transformed into art, and who could have imagined so much beauty on a tomb? Mole, copal, or incense, prayers, fruits, bread, music, corridos, or stories, romantic songs. It was before these ornate gravesites when I knew in my heart those that have departed return every year to remind us of their love, and that only love can save us. In some ways, celebrating Dia de los Muertos as a family had the same emphasis on family as other holidays. But this one was felt deeper. As we placed the photos of our departed loved ones and their favorite snacks on the altar, as we lit candles to light the way, we were reminded of our ancestors. My grandparents, my parents' aunts and uncles, our great-grandparents. We would tell old family stories of these relatives who my brother and I knew so little about. Dia de los Muertos was a way of remembering our ancestors and celebrating how they were with us still today, even in death. It helped us to keep their memories alive to ensure that they weren't forgotten. Dia de los Muertos was a special way that we kept a connection to our family traditions. Yet even with this background, I still wrestle with my identity being both a white person and also Mexican American. I wrestle with this because I experience the world as a white person with a lot of privilege. My identity seldom comes up in conversations, and oftentimes people assume that I am just of European ancestry. I hesitate to even mention other parts of my identity at times because I fear that others might not believe me. I also know that there is so much of my experience that is different from non-white Mexican Americans and Latinx people. I don't experience the systemic injustice and overt racism and prejudice against people of color in this nation. If I'm being honest, I approached this service with some hesitation. I knew what it might look like at face value. A white person leading a predominantly white UU congregation in a Dia de los Muertos service. Right now in our association, we are wrestling with how to honor holidays and traditions like Dia de los Muertos without causing hurt and harm through cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is what happens when one culture, usually the privileged culture, takes elements from a disadvantaged culture and places them outside of their original meanings and contexts. The UUA has published resources and materials on Dia de los Muertos, but Latinx UUs have cautioned congregations against celebrating it unless it is shared from people connected to the culture. The Reverend Marisol Caballero speaks to how it feels when predominantly white UU congregations celebrate this tradition without an authentic connection. She writes, when white people celebrate El Dia de los Muertos, not as the personal invited guest of Mexicans, it feels to me like someone has crashed a family funeral or a wake. In other words, it feels disrespectful and even insensitive. Now, it's deep in our theology to look to world traditions and faiths for inspiration. And our fourth principle invites us into a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The third source of our living tradition maintains that we seek inspiration from the wisdom of the world's faith traditions to enhance our understandings of an ethical and spiritual life. And yet, this must be done delicately. When we look to other traditions as sources, we must avoid taking rituals and celebrations outside of their original culture and context. At that point, we become accomplices and agents in cultural appropriation. However, there are moments when we can celebrate rituals and traditions authentically within our own tradition. And in fact, when we do this right and we honor traditions shared by people connected to them, we can create some truly transformative and affirming worship spaces. I experienced that as a kid that Sunday I went to church with Grandma Torch. I felt deeply affirmed in my identity, and it felt authentic to have people connected to this tradition share it with the wider community. In a way, having a service like this showed me that I belonged. It showed me a Unitarian universalism that could hold all of who I was, even with identities in tension with one another. And this is the beauty of our tradition as Unitarian Universalists. We hold a deep vision that this is possible to hold all of who we are in community together, even when so many of us come from different identities, beliefs, cultures, and perspectives. We have a great opportunity to honor and appreciate the richness of this vibrant tradition. And we can pay respect to how meaningful this ritual is for those who celebrate it. We can also take some deep lessons from our own theology as Unitarian Universalists, and where our theology meets Dia de los Muertos. A question at the heart of Dia de los Muertos for me is that wider question of who are we? In Spanish, the question, ¿Quiénes somos? Who has come before us? And how can we honor their living memories? I see an intersection with Dia de los Muertos and how we also view death in our own tradition. Especially in the wake of the upcoming election, we can honor those who have gone before us by voting for a world that they would be proud of. We can hold their memories close to our hearts as we discern who should lead us in the years to come and what decisions should be made that best manifest our values. We can honor the many generations of those who have gone before us by ensuring our voices are heard and that we make it out to vote. Dia de los Muertos reminds us of this reality, that those who have passed away aren't truly gone. They are with us still. Our ancestors are a part of our living community. We who are living carry their flames with us throughout our lives. And those who have died are alive in us just as we keep their memory alive. Friends, our UU theology calls us to celebrate life. And this doesn't mean that we should be afraid of death. Rather, as the title of this service suggests, we ought to see death in light of celebrating life. Una celebración de la vida. Whether we celebrate life with altars or marigold petals, with calaveras or corridos, or even simply in gathering together and keeping the memory alive of those who have gone before. We're reaching back to our ancestors and remembering more of who we are today. As the hymn we are about to sing tells us next, we are our grandmother's prayers and our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We can say yes to life through honoring death, realizing that while death is at times scary, there's nothing to fear. They are with us still. We honor their living memories by voting for and manifesting a world in which each one of us might live out our fullest lives. So my closing for you all this morning is this. In the spirit of Dia de los Muertos, may we be ready to answer yes to life. May we, as Unitarian Universalists, create a vibrant living tradition in which all of us find welcome, inclusion, and affirmation. May we mourn those who have died, but celebrate their living legacies that are with us still. As you go out into this next week, I invite you to remember those you love who have died. Look for the ways that you still see them showing up in your life. The little tells, the little fingerprints that you see everywhere, marking that they are still with you. And more importantly, to those of you heading out to the polls this week, and to those of you who still have yet to have your voice heard, get out and vote. Carry your loved ones with you as you participate in this sacred rite of democracy. Vote for a future that reflects our shared life-affirming faith. Vote for love. Because as Dia de los Muertos teaches us, it is only love that can save us. May it be so, and amen. Invoking the living memory of our loved ones and our collective prayers for creating a world that reflects our values, we'll go now to Kit, who will lead us in singing our closing hymn.